Tulare County Voices at 210, our monthly forum here at 210, second Tuesday of the month, to discuss issues of interest and importance to our community. We do this every month thanks to the generosity of First Presbyterian Church, which lends us this space. And we are very grateful. And I'd like you to give a nice round of applause to First Presbyterian Church right now. Our other sponsors for Tulare County Voices at 210 are the Visalia Times Delta, the Valley Voice, and I guess that's it, huh? And you all, yeah, I guess that's it. Happy birthday! Happy 250th birthday to our nation. Which is what we decided to devote tonight's discussion to. U.S. at 250, why we celebrate and how. So tonight's event is not going to be your typical form. Oh, by the way, my name is Paul Hurley. I'm the moderator here. I don't know if maybe some of you didn't know who I am. There's going to be three parts to tonight's event. The first part is going to be a fun, right, Miley? You're going to keep this fun, right? Yeah, revolutionary quiz on American history. The second part is going to be a lively discussion from our three distinguished historian slash authors slash erudite teachers. To my immediate right, Newell Bringhurst, retired professor of history and political science at College of the Sequoias. You got fans, Newell. You got fans. Next to Newell is Curtis Wilson, who is I guess you're also retired, a teacher of history and also a curator of the California History Day, which takes place every year, and he did that for many years. I got that right, Curtis? Excuse me?
I was a judge, yes.
California History Day is sponsored by Tulare County Office of Education. Thank you. And last but not least, Dr. Stephen Tootle, distinguished professor of history at College of the Sequoias. Welcome. And thank you. And the third part, Jason Glick of the City of Visalia Parks and Recreation Department is here to talk a little bit, or explain a little bit about what is happening for the 4th of July here in the City of Visalia to celebrate. I keep wanting to say semi-quincentennial, but if I say that, that gives away an answer to one of the questions, doesn't it, Miley? So now that I've already spilled the beans, I'm going to turn things over to Miley Melkonian. Don't hold the rest of the planning committee responsible for this.
Oh, I got some input from everybody. So Brian, our intrepid tech guy in the back, will be helping me with this. Are you sure is that? Okay, I lost my revolutionary font. Are you sure that's not the PowerPoint version, but the other one? Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we thought it would be fun to test your knowledge, and there are prizes. Okay. Yes. Yes. I think everybody, we're out of copies, so I think.
We're out of copies?
Yeah. Huh. Yes, we are. So go ahead and let's see the first question. Okay. Paul kind of gave something away, kind of, but what is the term for a 250th anniversary? You know, when we had the bicentennial, that rolled off of everybody's tongue, right? Bicentennial.
Miley, are we supposed to answer this?
So
You
what
gonna
we
ask for
want
people
is
to raise their hands, or
yes, if you know the answer, raise your hand, and whoever gets it right first. Okay, Melinda. Okay, okay. Anybody else? Does anybody else have an answer? It's a little bit of a trick question.
no? Wait a second. We had a couple of other people volunteer to answer back
Can
there.
anybody else give an answer? I'm going to say that Melinda was part right. Melinda was
Maya,
20% right.
we
Raise your hand so we know who's yes. You're also 20% right. Anybody? Yes, Carol. Another 20%. Yes. Yes.
hey.
Okay, Corey. All of the above. All of the above. Okay, so Corey gets the prize. She gets a constitution. Yes, all of those multisyllabic terms are correct. But B, so Melinda, B is the term that Congress used when they set up the Bipartisan United States Semi-Quincentennial Commission in 2016 to oversee the nation's celebrations this year. However, last year, an executive order diverted the funding for this commission to the newly established White House Task Force on Celebrating America's 250th birthday. So the funding went from this commission to that task force. So this was set up by Congress, and the task force, of course, is being organized by the White House. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Question 2, which of these New England states were not among the original 13 colonies that declared independence from England in 1776? Yes. Well, okay, Vermont. Vermont is correct. There's also a possibility for someone else to win a constitution because there were 2. What was the other one? Maine, okay. 1 constitution here and 1 constitution to the gentleman right there. Yes, okay. Answer, please. Yes.
Wasn't that
Okay, Maine was part of Massachusetts. There was no colony of Maine. Maine was part of Massachusetts until it became a separate state in 1820. Vermont was, this is kind of interesting, Vermont was claimed, the area of Vermont was claimed by both New York and New Hampshire, both colonies, resulting in it declaring itself an independent republic in 1776. So for a brief moment, Vermont was an independent republic all by itself. They later joined the Union as the 14th state in 1791. Okay, next question, Brian.
By the way, anytime any of our panel of historians here wants to challenge them, please feel free to weigh in.
Question number 3. In 1775-76, this is in the winter, the first major military action of General George Washington's Continental Army was an unsuccessful 5-month campaign to force a neighboring colony to join the revolution. Which colony was that? Linda, I think your hand was up first. That's correct. You want to show the answer there? Yeah. Quebec. So this might help us understand Canada's bristling at recent talk of a 51st state. And our historians might help us. I don't know if you plan to do this, but I'm not a historian, but there were, by my count, at least 3 other times in history when the United States tried to claim parts of Canada. But it started earlier than I realized, just from the get-go. Ohio was never a colony, and Florida was founded as a Spanish colony, but it was under British control at the time of the Revolution, and its population remained loyal to the king. That's why they were not one of the revolting colonies. The treaty ending the war returned Florida to Spain, so England lost Florida as well. Okay, all right. Question number 4. All right. Who was the most important diplomat for the colonies during the Revolution? Mark, I think your hand went up first. John Jay? Okay, someone else? Oh, Carol, I'm sorry. Benjamin Franklin, yes. Okay, now there is perhaps a little bit of subjectivity here. And if you know me, you know that Benjamin Franklin is my patron saint. But a very cogent argument, I feel, can be made for this because he was our ambassador to France during the war. And he masterfully secured French ships. We did not have a navy. Munitions, funding, fighters, and diplomatic support, without which most historians agree the colonies would have likely lost the war. And I don't know if you have another subjective answer, but I feel that the role of diplomacy is too often underappreciated in our history, in our historical accounts. We learn a lot about the military campaigns and not enough about the role of diplomacy. And Benjamin Franklin was having a very difficult time being successful with diplomacy until the King of France received news that the Continental Army had actually won a significant battle, because it was a very long time until they won a significant battle. Okay, all right, next.
Drop the other shoe, Miley. What battle was it? You got to make that a question.
Oh, should have made that. Did you?
Well,
should we make it a bonus?
yes, make it a bonus.
What was that significant battle that? Say that again. Saratoga. Yes. So wait, you already have a constitution, right? Okay.
Sorry, sir. No double dipping.
Okay, number 5. Yes. How many constitutions has the U.S. had? Oh, wait a minute. You can't answer.
Yeah, you can't answer. You've seen the answers.
Okay, I'm afraid the cat is out of the bag on that one. So I do think that a lot of Americans believe that our current Constitution has been our Constitution from 1776, and that is patently not true. Our first Constitution, which was officially called the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, was written in 1777 and ratified in 1781. It very soon became evident that a more durable perpetual union agreement needed to be crafted, resulting in ratification of the Constitution of the United States in 1789. Darn it, I should have made that the bonus. Okay, okay. All right, number 6. All right, how does the Constitution originally define, and by the Constitution, we're talking about the 1789 Constitution, how does it originally define citizenship? Yes?
It has to be property ownership.
Okay, any other answer? That's not correct, but it's a very, it's an understandable answer given. None of the above. Okay, Constitution over here, James. Yes, none of the above. The original 1789 Constitution does not define citizenship, nor does the Bill of Rights, our first 10 amendments. Only the 14th Amendment, which dates from 1868, has anything to say in this regard, and that is it's a law that is one sentence long, if you can imagine a law being one sentence long. So I will read it in its entirety. Quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Oh, wait a minute. No, this is the 14th Amendment, so it is not one sentence long. This is part of the 14th Amendment. The 13th Amendment is one sentence long, and the 15th Amendment is one sentence long, but the 14th Amendment is quite a bit longer. So this is an excerpt from it, and this is all that defines citizenship in our Constitution, and that dates from 1868. Okay, question number 7. What percentage of the U.S. population voted in the first U.S. presidential election? Okay, Linda? 2. That's right. Okay. The franchise excluded blacks, Native Americans, and other ethnic groups, as well as women. Children, we still exclude children. Voting age varied from state to state, with the most common voting age being 21, but in some states it was 25, some 18. Among white men, only property owners were eligible, so that's probably where you're getting your answer. Also, the majority of the population was rural, and travel to polling sites was difficult. Okay, there's a bonus question for question 7. Go ahead, hit it again. Wait a minute, where's the bonus question? Okay, okay, yeah, this didn't seem to okay, bonus question is, in what year, I think it's on your things. In what year did the number of eligible voters increase in the United States most dramatically? Okay. Okay. Mark, do you mind if I call on someone
can,
else?
can we have somebody who hasn't won a constitution?
Okay,
rather than those
Dale.
who've won 3?
Huh? 1920. Yes. Absolutely. Why?
Women.
That's the 19th Amendment. Okay. Yes, when the 19th Amendment was ratified, it effectively doubled the number of eligible voters. Okay, we have one more question. I'm going to have to use this. Okay.
We don't have that on the screen?
But it didn't
Oh, there's the bonus question. Okay.
actually the
No.
largest decrease.
Just
Yeah, but
power
the-
through that to number 8.
What happened here?
There we
Yeah.
go. Okay.
Warning,
I put
this is a real trick question.
yeah. Okay, which subsequent revolution was inspired by the American Revolution? Was it the French Revolution of 1789? Was it the Haitian Revolution of 1791? Was it the Venezuelan War of Independence, 1810? Or was it the Russian revolutions of 1905 and 1917? Anyone want to guess?
It's your last chance for a pocket constitution.
Bingo. All of the above. Yeah, it was a trick question and more. Our revolution has inspired, I don't know if it's inspired every revolution since then, but it has inspired a lot of independence movements around the world. So I guess that's all I have to say about that. All right.
What do you think? How much of that was like total hooey?
Just like 2 things were wrong.
Just 2 things you're wrong? Go ahead.
One of them's important and the other one's not important. But one of them is a minor semantic issue, which is you said that the percentage of eligible voters who voted happened when women got the vote, but that's actually not true. It was the exact opposite. The voter participation was at an all-time high through most of the late 19th, very early 20th century, and when women became eligible to vote, it actually dropped the percentage of eligible voters who actually voted in the election. The other,
Yeah. So, we'll
and
let
then-
you guys hash that over later.
All right,
What's
then
the other one?
the other
Steve?
thing that was somewhat more significant is when you said that, well, you got, I think it was a good and important question to point out that the original Constitution didn't define citizenship, because this was largely defined, who got to vote was defined by the states. But it was actually pretty important that black people and women and Native Americans could vote in many states when the Constitution was ratified. And that becomes very important in the run-up to the Civil War, because it's a point that Abraham Lincoln makes during the Dred Scott debate, that the status of black people has actually gotten worse, because as more people could vote, the great expansion of who could vote was to base it not on property, which did include, in some cases, women, Native Americans, black people, but instead, states changed to expand who could vote by including poor people. And because legally people voted by household, that meant it was a property qualification. Get rid of that, and then they change it to adult white males, which expands the number of people who can vote, but immediately it removes black people, women, and Native Americans from many voting roles. But it was a really important point. It was something that Lincoln pointed out.
Boy, I thought Miley could split hairs. My goodness.
Right, I'm saying black
Voting
people, this is important. Black people, it's an important point because Lincoln makes the point during the Civil War that the Dred Scott decision is illegal and ahistorical because when the Constitution was constituted, it was constituted by we the people. And when the Constitution was constituted, black people could vote and did vote for the ratification of the Constitution. So it was ahistorical to say that black people were not part of the people who originally constituted the government of the United States. That's not a pedantic point. It's a really important point. That black people have been part of the United States and were part of the voting bloc that created the United States of America.
Are you talking about free blacks and
No,
blacks who were
no,
enslaved?
No,
all blacks, whether
no,
enslaved
no,
or not.
I didn't say all, and I didn't say slaves. I said some black people in free states could vote, and therefore black people were among the people who constituted the United States, who approved and ratified the Constitution, which means that the Dred Scott decision is completely ahistorical and wrong, and Lincoln pointed that out. And most Americans would have known that at the time.
I was going to add, in a number of the early states, can you hear this okay? In a number of the early states, and I can't remember which ones they were, women were also allowed to vote initially. And so, I think it was a couple of, Vermont, yeah. And so women actually had the franchise, which was later taken away.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the point, is that as you expand the franchise, as you let more people vote, as you give the majority more power, they often take power away from unpopular minorities, including Native Americans and black people and women. Yeah.
Okay. Did you all like that exercise in a little delving into our history?
Well, she was saying it as an explanation for why only 2%, that's not the reason why only 2% voted. The reason why only 2% voted was that most states had not set up democratic institutions for the selection of electors when in the first voting cycle. That's why only 2% of the people voted.
Okay. Good. Any other questions so far? All right. We're going to go to our second part of our forum tonight, and that is, how do we know our history? How well do we know our history? Well, I think we just learned that, actually. But I put out a couple of questions here, just in general terms, that I hope you guys would discuss formally and informally. But remember, this is a discussion, which is why there are mugs on your table to remind you that think of yourselves as a bunch of guys sitting around having a beer after work, or maybe three nascent revolutionaries talking it over at the Cock and Bull Tavern on Tremont Street in Boston, circa 1774, okay? But how's teaching of American history changed? I think we originally set the line at from the 1950s to the present. I think we started to say the 50s because for many of us, that's when we started learning American history.
I've looked this over and thought about this. I think it's changed in three significant ways between the 1950s as down to the present. First of all, is the emphasis that's been placed on aspects of American history. In the 1950s, the big emphasis was on political history, great men, presidential synthesis type of history, and consensus, the things that kind of united us and made us a strong, and at that time, the preeminent world power. And the other thing that kind of defined the way history was taught, it was taught in the shadow and in the context of the Cold War. Everybody was talking about the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. And there was a lot of talk about perhaps we were approaching Armageddon. I remember growing up with that, the shadow of duck and cover and building fallout shelters. And then the third way was the methodology that was used in teaching history during the 1950s. The methodology, unfortunate at that time, a lot of rote memorization. I remember people, I always loved history, but I remember a lot of my contemporaries said, oh gosh, I hate that topic. All we have to do is memorize names and dates. Well, that has all really changed, again, in three ways. The first major change has been a movement away from strictly presidential consensus history and an emphasis on the diversity and the conflicts that kind of shaped the course of American history. The emergence of the civil rights movement, which really influenced the change of history, the emergence of the women's liberation movement, and even gay LGBTQ has entered into the dialogue of the teaching of history. The second way that history has changed is the way we look at the rest of the world, or the way we are related to the rest of the world. Instead of that being the focus being on the Cold War, U.S. versus Russia, it's America's kind of decline in a way, but the better term would be the increasing complexity of our relationship with other countries. And then thirdly, the third major is the methodology, the way that history is taught. The emphasis on the methodology of critical thinking, instead of names, dates, but an emphasis on why, how, and the consequences of how things happen. And more recently, the technology has really revolutionized the availability and learning of history with digital resources, and that has really, I see those are the three major changes.
Anything to add, Curtis, Steve?
Well, Newell did a great job of going over the historiography and how history is taught over time, and definitely
Talk to your audience.
definitely the Cold War was a big thing. I remember looking at the maps where part of the world is red and third world, first world, all that stuff. So I'm going to focus on my experiences in elementary, high school, and teaching 30 years of high school. A big thing that really shaped teaching the history are textbooks. Textbooks are controlled by two major markets in the United States, Texas and California, because we're big. And again, as we go into, say, into the 1960s and 70s, where we start teaching more social history about women, minorities, LGBTQ people, there will be some backlash against this. But in the classroom, it's driven by a textbook. And textbooks are designed to, they market textbooks. And they don't want to offend anybody. And also, many well-meaning teachers, including myself, will see the textbook is the backbone of basically the curriculum. And I did go to Fresno Pacific, and we went and got into, and I was also part of the history project. So we start getting in more into primary documents, critical thinking, writing, discussion, stuff like that. But still, the textbook is there. In the 90s, I was given a really great book by Lowen called Lies My Teacher Taught Me. And at first I thought, what's this radical book? And I found out that I was teaching lies. Like, Woodrow Wilson hated imperialism, and he loved democracy, and then realized, well, he did invade Mexico, and there was, the Red Scare and all that stuff, and a crackdown on free speech, which he said he is all for. And so that shook me up a little bit. So I began to question the textbook a little bit more. And again, hanging out with really good teachers and college professors. I read for the College Board for about 12 years, reading AP exams, and met a lot of great people from all over the country. And here is something, especially parents or grandparents out there, you really have so much power to determine what your kids learn just by modeling learning in your house. If you read to your kids, if you read in front of your kids, if you talk about history with your kids, they're going to learn so much more. The Great Depression, I wasn't old enough to remember that, but I did talk to my Aunt Peggy. My friend's mother came out from Oklahoma, lived on a ditch bank near Farmersville, and these are powerful stories. So yes, The Grapes of Wrath is a great book. So back to textbooks in historiography. When you have a great teacher in that classroom and that door is closed, that teacher's going to teach. And if you have an okay teacher that's going to have the textbook and the kids are going to read the textbook and answer the questions at the end of the chapter, and the teacher's going to play solitaire on the computer or whatever, there are those guys too. So if you get involved with your kids' education and model learning, that's going to be a big thing. Now, the controversies, and again, that might be the next question. We'll talk about the culture wars. But again, that's my perspective. Textbooks drive a lot of this, but also, again, professional in-services, things like that, how good of a teacher. And I think it's your job as a parent or grandparent to see that your kids get the best education possible. And if you can't find it at your school, practice it at home.
Yeah. History education, I mean, I agree largely with everything that's been said before, but I would just, because I am a historian, I can't help but do this, but history teaching in the 1950s and early 1960s was a time of consensus, and so-called consensus historians who were arguing from a large thesis, largely coming out of the World War II experience, understanding that the Nazis were the bad guys. That's not news, right? And is that a controversial point? The Nazis were the bad guys.
Be careful, Pete.
Yeah, I know. Not to get political, but and that consensus began breaking down after Kennedy's death. A rising tide of cynicism from some intellectual quarters about, and actually from some good social science work that was being done, realizing that some of the programs the government was funding and interested in, they weren't working very well, but they were politically popular. And then as the Vietnam War became increasingly unpopular, starting in 1968, that made people turn against the teaching of military history. So for those of you who went to school a long time ago, you might think that history is largely political, diplomatic, and military history, and I can tell you that that is absolutely not true, that there's almost no teaching of political, diplomatic, or military history in higher education anymore. And the fact that it, to the extent it is taught, it is being taught by non-experts. It's taught because it's still part of the curriculum, but the people who are hired to do it are not experts. I remember when I first came into the Valley, I realized that I was the only person with a PhD in American political history at any college in the center of California. There was nobody at Fresno State, nobody at Bakersfield State, no Cal State, nobody. I was the only one. There were no experts in diplomatic history teaching at four-year universities. There were no experts in military history, none. So those subjects are still being taught, but they're being taught by people who don't actually specialize in the subject. And there were institutional changes that took place in the 70s as well, with the rise of graduate schools and programs with the word studies in them. And largely those programs grew into alternatives to the study of history, but they fell into two big buckets, either theoretical programs where it was like a social science, or programs with a political agenda. And history was squeezed even more. And a lot of diplomatic history stopped being taught with the rise of the international relations major. And then political history stopped being taught largely. By the 2000s, there was this period of time in the mid-2000s where there were 0 job openings in the United States for political historians. That means that if you graduated and had a PhD in political history, there were no job openings for, I think, 3 consecutive years. That should tell you how universities banished political history from higher education. So I would say history education has suffered because, again, I don't know if this is a controversial statement, you can't teach something you don't know. And that means that the teachers often were not subject matter experts in what they were required to teach. And you can't necessarily, so you can't blame the students for not learning, and I don't think you can blame the high school and elementary school teachers for what they learned. You have to start, I think, blaming the people who systematically got rid of the expertise in political, diplomatic, and military history. But it wasn't something that happened overnight. It's something that happened over the decades. And so, of course, we all had some good history teachers. They're still out there. I mean, I can say that I've observed some history teachers at Golden West and El Diamante who are excellent. And if you have kids or grandkids who go to Golden West or El Diamante, you can feel very good, I think, about their history and civic education from what I've seen. But I've also, conducted interviews of people who have master's degrees in history, who are interviewing for jobs at COS, and they're supposed to give a 15-minute presentation on a specific subject, and they simply can't do it. And these are people who are in high school history classes every single day. And in many cases, they walk in the door and they say, I've got 30 years of experience, and I've been an AP instructor. And we tell them to give a 15-minute teaching presentation on, the origins of the Cold War or the outbreak of the Mexican-American War. We had one, I think I can reveal this. This isn't being recorded, right? But we had one that was asking about the Iranian hostage crisis. And we had a candidate who handed out pictures of people in blindfold and asked us how we felt about it. And a lot of history education, when I talk to my own kids, is people hand out pictures and say, how do you feel about this? And we don't want memorization, but you have to know something.
Stephen, how's the teaching of history holding up in higher education now? Because many universities these days, and many of them are reducing subject matters in the humanities and other so-called.
So, some things, got some bad news for you.
No, not here.
Civic education is at a modern all-time low. Keep in mind that around 40-ish% of college students can't read, or they read below a 3rd grade level. The majority of people who are under the age of 25 don't value civic education or patriotism at all. They don't think of it, either of those things are even goals to be attained. Civic education at the 8th grade and 12th grade level is, you would say, completely substandard for around 46 to 48% of students. They could not pass even a basic test, and not as difficult as this, about any history. And the majority of students would fall into that barely passing. It's never been worse. There are some glimmers of hope, however, in that people have recognized that the institutions themselves have become so corrupt that many people have started creating and funding institutions within colleges specifically designed to teach political, diplomatic, military history, and civic education generally. And many states have had their state legislatures actually sponsor these new programs. One of them, and I know this because all of my friends are getting poached to teach at these, because there are so few people who are my age who actually made it into academics, and that we all tended during the dark years to cluster together in a handful of programs, and one of them happens to be Ashland University in Ohio, where I still teach part-time there. And a lot of us still participated in this thing called Teaching American History, which I still work for them, and the Bill of Rights Institute. And I would say once you're a part of these organizations, we all know each other. And it's because there are only like 50 normal history professors in America, it seems like sometimes, And I just mean people who don't hate America, but who aren't crazy right-wingers or crazy left-wingers. We just want to teach history. And we don't hate, I guess I would just say we aren't primarily motivated by our hatred of this country. And so when they started these new systems, a lot of my buddies are now running them. So I would say go Solomon Chase Center at Ohio State, go Civic Education Center at the University of Tennessee, go Hamilton Center at the University of Florida, and other places are following suit. So in some ways, it indicates just how bad most of our institutions are, that people have felt the need to essentially start new ones.
What's the thing that's most not being taught in history? What Americans know the least about in our history?
I think the founding intent, but also the role that racism played in altering America's view of itself.
The role that racism played
because since before the founding, there have been racists who have tried to distort the meaning of America's founding, at first in order to justify slavery, but then in order to argue that the Constitution justified slavery, and then, the lost cause after the Civil War. But at every step of America's history, you've had essentially very motivated racists who have entangled themselves in almost every aspect of American history, and trying to disentangle those things is very difficult, because they care so much more about promoting their view of history than normal people care about getting it right.
The 1619 Project
Was terrible.
was terrible.
Yeah, exactly the opposite.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, probably done more to hurt history education than almost anything else.
Hold on. Let's wait for the mic so we can all hear you.
I was trying to hear from him. It sounded like he was going to help answer your
Well, we'll get to it.
Okay.
as opposed to one person answering all the
Do you have a question?
He wants to hear
Okay,
from
all right.
get questions from your other panelists.
Okay. I appreciate your
someone.
helping me out.
Yeah, maybe someone can address Steve's.
The question, what are kids not learning? Well, at the ground level, I broadly say prior knowledge. And this is something that is imparted by your culture. So when I have kids who profess to be churchgoers, cannot relate to a single Bible story, like 7 plagues, what's that about? Or Greek mythology, classical history. They are unaware of current events. So, say, hey kids, did you know that they just landed a satellite onto a comet?
Yeah, I would agree with Curtis. The whole idea of prior knowledge is, in my teaching career over some 35 years, I found that to be the case, not just for racism, but for all aspects of history, be it just the basic fundamental aspects of American political history, the Constitution. Because I had a dual appointment teaching both history and political science during my 25-year career at COS. And I was surprised, and maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, is the lack of knowledge that students had coming into my government political science classes, especially there, that they had such a limited knowledge of just the fundamentals of what was in our Constitution, what was in our Bill of Rights. And so when I taught those courses, I was sort of starting a little bit from square one.
But it gets
just
worse.
Just trying to get down the fundamentals of because I felt that to understand American history, American democracy, you have to understand just the content and the meaning of the foundational documents, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, as well as the Bill of Rights and what the documents that followed.
The thing is that my study guides and my class, I do cover the material. So I'll try to do a brief review of federalism, checks and balances, this stuff the kids should have learned in 8th grade. But if they don't have prior knowledge and their folks never talk about it, even the smartest kids who try really hard, they'll be overwhelmed with this fire hose of knowledge. And another giant black hole in the state curriculum is that there's not enough time to teach a review of early U.S. history, then Reconstruction to present, because and I'm pruning things way down. I'll be lucky to get to 1991 with the fall of the Soviet Union, which means you have a generation of kids who know nothing about 9/11 or the Iraq War, unless they have a relative who are there. And so I don't know the solution to that, but a lot of stuff people don't know.
Questions?
I have a question for Curtis. You brought up the thing about textbooks, and that I don't know how common knowledge this is, that textbooks in the United States basically come out of California or Texas. Can you tell us about the economics of that? Why does Rhode Island not come up with their own textbooks, or Wyoming?
They do have their own standards. Every state has their own state standards, and that's where it's set. But I assume that the textbook makers, say McGraw-Hill or whatever, try to tweak their edition a little bit with supplementary stuff for Rhode Island or some other state like that. They probably read textbooks geared for New England in general. I'm just guessing.
And publishers probably don't feel that it's cost effective to do 50 different textbooks, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yep.
But it has this follow-on effect too of, how a lot of new teachers, they walk into the classroom and they feel like they're drinking out of a fire hose, and in terms of knowledge. And I sometimes will observe teachers who are in that position, and the way that they're teaching, trying to prepare their AP students for the AP test or something. It seems like history to them, in order to not be controversial in either Texas or California, you have to essentially make the narrative, make the story of America nonsense. And it seems like it's a disconnected series of vocabulary words where they're just hitting the next slide and teaching kids the definitions of words, but they're not able to connect any of those ideas, and they don't know the answers to any of the questions that students have, because when they're forced to guess, that's all it is a guess, because they've never read narrative histories.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Hello, thank you for taking my question. Just recently received I've been a history teacher 20 years, just outside of Visalia in Farmersville. 11 years there, 9 in Corcoran. The history book that I received 5 years ago has about 87 pages from Jamestown to Reconstruction. And then I have 275 from progressivism to present day. Why do you think that is at in the textbook? And I believe it's apprenticed.
Well, if it's for 11th grade U.S. history,
Yes.
it's the state frameworks say that everything before Reconstruction, 1877-ish or whatever, is all review. They should have learned all that back in 8th grade and 6th grade. And again, we're relying on elementary and middle school teachers. So
And that was the next question, because they come in with zero prior knowledge. I'm still teaching them their states at the junior level.
a big problem, and again, I worked in Hanford, and we do not have a unified district there. So there's Hanford Elementary and Pioneer and Kit Carson feeding into Hanford High School Joint District. And when No Child Left Behind came up, kids had to pass 2 tests, language and math. And we even had some elementary school districts and middle school level had double blocks of English for language and math, and history and a lot of science went out.
Yes.
And that was just not covered. Honors kids would get history in 8th grade. Pioneer Middle School did an excellent job. And it's also where the wealthier people in Hanford live. Maybe it's a coincidence. So that's part of it there. So I got kids who didn't learn a lot in 8th grade. And I had to go over that and explain how U.S. government works in a history course and also I want to make it meaningful. So it's not just one trudge, they're going to read primary documents. They're going to read about Japanese American internment in Kings County,
Yes.
real stuff like that, Dust Bowl stuff, real things, but I still have to cover.
Yes, no, I agree. My last thing, do you think it's a vertical alignment that's not in order, that starts hurting that baseline of understanding what your country is? That you go from 3rd grade, you get your state test, you start learning your states, your state capitals, and then you move into junior high and you
And
see the preamble.
that carries on up to the college level. That's what I found when I was teaching, that lack of a base knowledge that Curtis was alluding to. And so that always presented a challenge to teaching both my history and my political science classes. And I guess I just learned to adjust, and I found that over the course of my 35-year teaching career, it seemed to become more and more of an issue. It seemed like there was a diminution of the teaching of history. And as you mentioned, Curtis, part of that was No Child Left Behind. That was the void, the lacuna that was completely left out, and that created a situation where this de-emphasis on the teaching and learning of history, and so I can imagine what a challenge it must be for teachers that are in the classroom now.
I have 2 stories, one both short. This will scare all of you. So about textbooks, which was there was an error in the textbook I was using about the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which is this diplomatic pact from the 1920s. And I used it in my class a lot as an example of, look, there's a mistake in our textbook, But one day I thought, this is silly, and I emailed the publisher and said, hey, just so you know, this is not what happened in the Kellogg-Briand Pact, and it's in the book and it's wrong. And they wrote me back and said, thank you very much. The next edition of the textbook came out, and they had just simply taken my email, copied and pasted it into the textbook, and thanked me in the acknowledgments. Now, if I had thought that they were going to do that, I would have taken a little more time with the email I was writing. But the reality was, at that time, I was teaching at a large university that was selling a lot of textbooks. So whatever I said I wanted in the textbook, they were just going to put it in there. And then talking about the background knowledge, I had a class 2 years ago. I was teaching the War of 1812 and the Star-Spangled Banner. And I'll make it short, but I didn't have any students in class who knew what dawn was. They didn't know what the word meant. They didn't know what twilight meant. They didn't know. The best guess from the class was that it had something to do with vampires. And they didn't know. This was one that I was really surprised, but they didn't know what the word gleaming meant. And when you say they don't have a background, yeah. It just when he's talking about background knowledge, it's very difficult to know where to begin a story if people don't have any, because you think, oh, I'm going to compare this to a Marvel movie, and kids haven't seen Marvel movies. Forget Star Wars, forget the Titanic, whatever cultural touchstone you think there is, that's been gone since 2009.
We have a question over here.
I think I know the answer, but why hasn't there been a state standardized test for history? I just got into teaching, at least at the middle school level, and I haven't seen it. I've seen science and math and English, but there's no history. And then the standards, speaking on those, it seems like we're coming on half a century since we've had the standards updated in California for history. So is there any word on those being updated and when and if? What's the priority?
The last workshop I went to at the Tulare County Office of Education was about 4 or 5 years ago, and the revised state frameworks focused on inquiry and not so much on pacing or specific factoids, you might say. And that might be the solution instead of having a grand multiple choice test, which people do question the validity of a multiple choice test because, won't get into that too much, but inquiry might be a better way. If kids could read and if they could write and explain what they've learned, and just make sure it's on paper because, I've gotten AI essays before I retired. So I don't know if that helps. Also, when you creating common finals just in my high school, that led to knockdown, drag-out fights. And so imagine at a state level having a state test. There was something called the Golden State exam for a while. But that was essays and all that.
In higher ed, we just went through a revision. It's actually coming out this year, where the Cal States, the community colleges, and the CSUs finally did get together through a process of common course numbering. And it didn't change much because in higher ed, we have academic freedom. K-12, you don't have academic freedom. So in higher ed, it tends to be, here are the course topics you must cover. But in K-12, here is the curriculum. It's handed, you must cover. It's very different, K-12 versus higher ed.
I was kind of ahead of the curve, and this is a question more for Paul. Growing up, we had 3 newspapers in the house, so it gave me the background for me to proceed, in the field of history when I was teaching. But how bad is the demise of newspapers and its impact on learning history?
Interesting.
Or anything. Gentlemen?
Yeah, the demise of newspapers, I think, has had a corrosive effect just on the dissemination of knowledge, and in general, particularly on a local level, what's happening locally and so on. But it has had a side effect on, I guess, how we perceive of the past. We're kind of in a situation today where it's ironic that we don't have newspapers, but we have all this kind of social media, which is kind of jumbled. It's not only jumbled what is legitimate knowledge versus what is made up, and that has had a fallout on the way that the past has been perceived, the way that history is perceived, because it kind of obfuscates it, and which alternate reality of history are you going to believe? So it's not just with the larger society with what is real, but what was real in the past in terms of past events and the sequence of what was really taking place.
I would have a lesson on Holocaust denial, and there's a historian named Deborah Lipschitz, I believe that's her name, and she was sued by a Holocaust denier, and so I had like a 5-minute TED Talk where she presented, and then I had basically kids look into various conspiracy theories, and I shared with them Snopes and other fact-checking things so that the kids could handle these things that they'll come across. And I had a kid tell me that kids at Golden West High School, if they identify as a furry, they could use a litter box at school. And I said, that's just not true. Well, one of my kids heard Joe Rogan say it's true. And I even showed it on, they didn't believe it. So misinformation is a serious problem.
Yeah, it's two sides of the same coin, journalism and history. And the problem is created because if what you want is your prejudice confirmed, that can be monetized. And you can get all of that you want for free in exchange for your personal information. But if you want the truth, you have to seek it out and you have to pay for it. But that has to be a social value that you hold. If you aren't currently paying for a news source, and if you aren't, I mean, how hard is it to confirm what's in it? If a historian is a real historian. Sometimes kids will bring me some book and I'll say, this guy's not a historian. Like, not everybody who writes about the past is a real historian. There are a lot of people out there who are cranks and whack jobs, and their books will get published if they can excite enough controversy. I mean, one of the things that I point out, this is something from early in my career, that the vast majority of Americans believe that there is a conspiracy to kill John Kennedy. And as part of my dissertation, I contacted every historian of the Kennedy administration, every living historian of the Kennedy administration. And I meant real historian, not crank, not whack job, meaning they have published scholarly books or articles on John Kennedy and the Kennedy administration. Contacted every one of them to see what percentage of historians believed that there was a conspiracy to kill Kennedy. And the answer was 0. Not 0%, 0. There's not a single academic historian who's a specialist in the Kennedy administration who believes anything other than Lee Oswald acted alone. But the vast majority of Americans, they don't like it. And you say, all right, well, there's some value you have that is higher than the truth.
Journalism is the first take on history. And in consuming either journalism or history, you still need to use an important faculty, and that is critical thinking. Because there have been untruths, mistakes, errors, and lies printed in daily journalism. And I dare say that there probably have been in history books as well. So you have to, use your critical thinking in approaching either one. One more, and I want to make sure we get time for Jason Glick. So,
Okay. Yeah, the sweep of 250 years of history, you mentioned political and military. What about economic history? The mechanized agricultural, mass production, the growth of the labor union, capital formation, technology. I mean, that's what a great part of what history has given us 250 years after.
Yeah, well, economic history it seems like it's always played a prominent role. It certainly was in the courses that I taught and the various sources that I used. There was always that constant stream of economic history. But I guess the way that economic history was interpreted had changed. Back in the 50s, comparing the 50s with the way history is taught now, in the 50s, the emphasis was on kind of the growth and the heroic role of various entrepreneurs and the fact that, but as we moved away from the 50s down to the present, there's been greater emphasis in the flaws, the way the flaws within the economic system, and those who are left behind, more of a, kind of interacting with social history, the economics, how it hasn't worked as well as it should, because up until the 50s, our economy just was, really booming, and we were the foremost power in the world. But then by the 70s, things were really slowing down, and looking back and saying, well, what was it about the flaws in the economic system that it wasn't working quite right for everybody?
For teaching economic history, it's a terrific theme that helps kids make sense of what's going on. And so if you have, say, a lesson on the multiplier effect after, say, 1929, and jobs are being lost, and your neighbor loses his job, that could lead to you losing your job. And so we have a simulation where the kids have to stand up when they lose their job. And so, again, that would just be one example so that they could understand it personally.
Or the history of the railroads.
Right. Or like this gold versus silver election of, like McKinley's election. That's a huge thing. Although for a lot of kids, that's kind of abstract. So we tell them about, the Wizard of Oz and get into that a little bit, So it's just a hook to try to get the kids to understand economic history.
A lot of good economic history has moved outside of the field of history. So much of the good economic history right now is being written by economists, and it's kind of embarrassing. But because economics has tended to keep their standards very high, that a lot of economists, when they get older, start becoming more interested in historical questions and start applying their skills to looking at the past, and they've been debunking a lot of the bad economics inflicted on the world by previous generations of historians. But there's been some really interesting stuff that has come out because of that. Understanding that the largest single wealth creator in American history was the freeing of the slaves. That's an important thing to know.
one final, quickly, because I want to end on a positive note. What can be done to teach history that's more effective, that's better for Americans, so they can learn the story of their nation?
Well, I feel that in order to make history live, I think you have to give a lot of personal interaction. Those individuals who make history happen, whether they be prominent people. I think if you personalize history, I've always been fascinated by biography, and I try to emphasize that.
Curtis?
I agree pretty much with what Newell says. It has to be personal, has to be relevant, has to touch them. So it has to be a good narrative instead of a list of things.
Yeah. Oh, Steve?
My neighbor across the street gave me this advice, Greg Collins, a former city councilman here. And probably the most important thing we did was we listened to their advice. No TV or internet Monday through Friday, and no phones for kids. Like, don't give your kid a phone. And I would say, as long as you can wait.
Very good.
My
I don't
number
think-
one discipline issue.
I doubt anybody in this room is going to disagree with that, Stephen. Hey, let's give our panel a great round of applause. They were terrific. Lou Bringhurst, Curtis Wilson, and Stephen Tootle, all of you were terrific. Great insights and conversation. I really appreciate your being with us here tonight. We have one more voice to hear from, however. The city of Visalia, Jason Glick.
Thank you, Paul. Jason Glick, Parks and Recreation Director, born and raised, educated in Visalia. Worked in recreation since the age of 15, but believe it or not, guess what my degree's in? History. There you go. Graduated from Fresno State in 1995. So I love history. Really, really appreciated the conversation. Thank you. So the city's got quite a bit going on. The first thing that's going to happen is the convention center. The convention center is going to be decorated in red, white, and blue. There's going to be banners that are going to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States. There's going to be lighting in the trees that will change from red, white, and blue, and the lighting is going to stay on until at the convention center until Veterans Day. On July 3rd, we have the Independence Spectacular event at Riverway Sports Park. That there's going to be a concert sponsored by Momentum Broadcasting. There's going to be vending booths, food booths. There's going to be a kids play zone. And at the end of the event, there will be fireworks. Last year, we had about 7,000 people at this event. We're anticipating a larger crowd this year. On Saturday, July 4th, we have a run at Riverway Sports Park that'll start at 8 a.m. This has been an annual event. It's a partnership event with a third-party group. The other thing I'd like to talk about, and believe it or not, next year is Visalia's 175th anniversary. We are the oldest city from Los Angeles to Stockton. The city was founded in February of 1852, and the city's going to put on 3 separate events. There's going to be a kickoff event in late February, early March. We're not quite sure what that's going to be yet. We're thinking it's going to be a concert with historical speakers, and that'll be the kickoff event. And then the second event will be the Independence Spectacular in 2027, where the big celebration will be the city's 175th anniversary. And the third and final event will be the opening of the new Civic Center, which is anticipated to open in September, October of 2027. So there's a lot going on at the end of the month, not only in Visalia, but in surrounding communities. I know the Country Club is going to having a fireworks show on July 3rd. There are several other cities having fireworks on and celebrations on July 4th. The local casinos are having events all weekend celebrating the 250th. So if you don't like what's going on in Visalia, you can also find something somewhere else. Any questions at all?
What's the 175th call?
I'm going to refer to Paul on that. What do we want to call that, Paul?
I believe the
175th, yeah.
I believe the Sequoia Symphony Orchestra also will be doing a concert in Tulare. On July 4th, yes. And the venue is not, is it Zumwalt Park? Oh.
The new amphitheater is in Zumwalt Park.
Okay, all right, yeah. So, and it may involve cannons.
They're talking about it.
Okay.
The price is $2.50.
Oh, okay.
other questions for Jason Glick or City of Visalia? Jason, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. One more plug, Paul. We have the June 19th event at the Anthony Center at 6 o'clock. We'd like to welcome everyone at that event. 5 o'clock, I'm sorry. It's 5 to 8 o'clock. Great event.
Is that a
great culture event.
Juneteenth? Is that a Juneteenth
It's
event?
Friday, June 19th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, panel. My name is Buddy Jones. I'm going to be 86 this year. I've tried to find a lot of place to establish my roots, and Visalia seems to be the place that got me. I'm going to be here till I'm gone. But in terms of history, a couple of things I've always been concerned about is that the first civil rights legislation of schools being it's unconstitutional to have segregated schools came out of Visalia, and that's never celebrated. The first black park superintendent in the national parks was here in our Sequoia Park. That came out of Visalia. So I find a lot of our own history is being left by the wayside. And I'm glad to announce that there's a group of us called With Visalia who have decided to celebrate these things and in the process learn our own history. And last Friday we took a group of 12 of us up to the parks and learned a lot about Charles Young, learned a lot about the national parks. And I got mad when I saw Hidden Figures, because I said I had to wait 75 years to learn that there were women and black women in NASA. And we have all these resources here in Visalia, and I would like to challenge the panel to say, let's have a review next year, because we have a group of people who are saying we're not just reviewing it in Visalia, we're doing it. We're gonna be doing things to get other people to find out more about our history and how we have a great point of reference here in Visalia.
Thanks, buddy.
I just had one comment I could make
Quickly.
on that. Yeah, very quickly, that on the Juneteenth, there'll be a presentation sponsored by the Tulare County Historical Society dealing with the three prominent overlooked black people that made an impact on our community, who were Wiley Hines, one of the largest landowners, African American, in the county, Charles Young, who you mentioned, the first African American superintendent of Sequoia National Park, and as Buddy has further alluded to, Weisinger, Emmett Weisinger, in a landmark California Supreme Court case desegregating the schools, Weisinger versus Crookshanks, that went all the way to the Supreme, and it desegregated the schools in California, and we're going to be presenting that at the Juneteenth on the 19th.
Thanks, Newell. Before we wrap up, this is our last forum until the fall. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge and recognize and thank the Planning Committee members for Tulare County Voices at 210, Molly Melkonian, Catherine Doe, Donna Kinshu. Is she still here? There you are. You're always back in the dark there. Bill Osak was here before but has left, and Lewis and Lou Griswold are our regular members, and Melinda Morales is our sort of part-time, and of course Donna Orozco is sort of auxiliary honorary member, spiritual guide or something like that. I don't know. Thank you all very much for your help in putting this together. Our next I anticipate our next forum will be on September 8th, and it will be discussion of, or celebration of the 100th anniversary of the College of Sequoias, which was founded 100 years ago this year. Our own Newell Bringhurst actually has a book coming out, A History of COS, that has been published or is about to be published.
Well, it's going to be published hopefully in my lifetime. And
That's-
it's supposed to be due out any time. They keep pushing the date back. I don't know what they're waiting for, but they keep pushing the ultimate publication date back, and I think they're tired of me asking them. I keep asking I thought it was supposed to be out by now. And they said, oh, we got this more. One more thing. It sounded like Columbo.
Newell, that's a lament I have heard every author I've ever met make. We're looking forward to it, Newell, and we certainly hope it'll be out by September 8th. We hope you will all be here on September 8th to help us celebrate COS's 100, and I do hope you all have a wonderful, safe, glorious 4th of July and a safe and happy summer. Thank you very much. Good night.
Hey, good to see you.